In South Korea, the Mid-Autumn Festival, also known as Chuseok, takes place in mid-autumn. It is a time to honor ancestors and family, where people gather together and perform meaningful commemorative rituals in the warm atmosphere of Chuseok. Families often return to their hometowns, where grandparents, parents, and loved ones reside. They make songpyeon, round rice cakes filled with red bean or sesame, to strengthen bonds across generations. The happiness and togetherness associated with the Mid-Autumn Festival may remain as an ideal aspiration for some, but the reality can sometimes be harsh and even heartbreakingly cruel, as seen in the story of one family during Chuseok 2013 in Sund. On the last day of the Chuseok holiday in 2013, September 23rd, a mother from her rural hometown, filled with love and longing, carefully packed some homemade delicacies and fresh fruits to visit her 38-year-old daughter. She always believed that with her daughter's diligent and hard-working nature, she must still be busy earning extra money to support her small family. With a heart full of love, the elderly woman took a bus to her daughter's hair salon in Isan, Gochang City, Jeollabuk-do Province, South Korea. Upon arriving in front of the salon, the mother was a bit surprised. Contrary to what she had expected, the salon's lights were off, and the door was firmly shut. Thinking her daughter might be enjoying a family reunion meal, the mother considered turning around and catching the bus back to her hometown. However, just as she was about to walk away, she suddenly felt something was amiss. She knew her daughter's personality well. From a young age, her daughter had always been diligent and industrious. Since the opening of the hair salon, her daughter had consistently kept it running without ever closing, not even during illnesses. Yet today, the salon was closed even during daylight hours. This made the mother wonder if something might have happened to her daughter. She decided to call her daughter, but no one picked up, and the phone kept ringing endlessly. In the end, she decided to call her son-in-law. Upon hearing this, the son-in-law frantically tried calling his wife, but, like the mother, he couldn't reach her. After thinking for a while, he immediately contacted the kindergarten where their daughter attended, as his wife usually dropped off their child at around 9 a.m. every morning. The answers he received were baffling. Their daughter had not been to class today. This was unusual, as she had never missed a day of school. The kindergarten teachers became increasingly concerned when they too attempted to contact the mother, but received no response. The husband called his mother-in-law back and explained the situation. Then he asked his mother-in-law, who was still in front of the salon, "Please stay there, I'll come and pick you up." Standing outside her daughter's quiet salon, the mother tried to suppress her growing anxiety as she waited for her son-in-law to arrive. After some time, the son-in-law arrived, picked her up, and they went to the kindergarten together. There, they spoke with the teachers and confirmed that the child had not come to school that day. They then returned home together. Upon returning to the apartment, both the mother-in-law and the son-in-law sensed that something was amiss. Before them was the front door, which was usually closed securely for safety, now left ajar by about 50 sinepen and propped open with a doorstop. Why would the wife, who was home alone with the young children, leave the door open like this? Feeling an ominous premonition, the mother-in-law and son-in-law rushed into the house. Inside, the young daughter ran out crying and clung to her father. A growing sense of dread filled the air. With trembling hands, the husband went into the living room to check and was shocked to find his wife lying motionless. He immediately rushed to her, attempting emergency resuscitation, but it was futile. It wasn't until later that he realized her heart had already stopped beating. After reporting the incident to the authorities, the husband sat helplessly on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Beside him, their 2- and 3-year-old daughters, not understanding what was happening, joined in crying, their wails echoing the heartbreak of the scene. Detectives reassured the husband and began a step-by-step investigation. In cases like these, the husband is often the primary suspect. Therefore, the following day, investigators summoned him to the police station for questioning. The husband admitted that his relationship with his wife had not been good. Due to some financial disputes, they had been living apart for the past month. He also disclosed that the couple had 3 daughters, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. The eldest, aged 5, lived with him at his parents' home in Hanoi, while the 3- and 2-year-old daughters stayed with their mother at the house they had once shared, which was also the crime scene. He candidly recounted that the day before the incident, he had brought their eldest daughter back to visit his wife for a reunion meal. Specifically, he said that they had gone to the supermarket together, then returned home to enjoy grilled pork belly. After dinner, he put the children to bed because it was late, and he and his wife had a heartfelt conversation. When his wife mentioned feeling sleepy, he woke their 5-year-old daughter and returned to his parents' house with her. That was the last time the husband saw his wife alive. When asked if they had argued that evening, he explained that while they had previously quarreled before their separation, they had been discussing ways to reconcile that night. Tragically, before they could rebuild their family, he found himself witnessing his wife's death the next day. Anyone familiar with cases like this would naturally suspect the husband as the perpetrator. However, beyond his testimony, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect due to clear alibi evidence. First, upon examining the victim's phone, investigators found that the eldest daughter had accidentally recorded a video of her mother washing dishes that evening while playing with the phone. A message was also found on the wife's phone from the previous day, saying, "Let's start over," perfectly aligning with the husband's account. Second, CCTV footage from the elevator captured the husband and his daughter leaving the house that night, waving affectionately towards someone outside, corroborating his story. Although the exact time of the wife's death has not been determined, it can be said that she was still alive at least until 12:26 a.m. on the Tuesday, when the investigator questioned the young daughter, who had entered the elevator with her father, and waved goodbye to her mother. "Why did you wave goodbye like that?" the investigator asked. The little girl replied, "Because Mom waved goodbye to me. She waved goodbye to me and Dad like this." This was a clear alibi. On Wednesday, although the police continued to investigate the husband's whereabouts after he left the elevator, as seen on CCTV, he carried his daughter straight to the underground parking lot and then drove off to his parents' house. After that, he never returned to his wife. Following a thorough investigation, it became clear that someone had broken into the house after the husband left and killed the wife inside. So who was the perpetrator? Many rumors spread throughout the neighborhood about possible suspects, including delivery drivers, postal workers, and other employees. People couldn't stop discussing who might be behind this mysterious case. For the police, their task was only to find and rely on evidence to speak specifically. Besides observing the crime scene and noting injuries to the abdomen and neck, which showed signs of trauma, the police also found that the victim's bra had been lightly removed and her underwear was shifted. Saliva was found on both her left and right breasts. From this, the police suspected a sexual assault. However, soon after, these suspicions were dispelled. First, the victim's bra had only been lightly removed, and her underwear shifted in an unusual direction. According to experts in such cases, the bra is usually pulled upward. However, the victim's bra was pulled downward. Additionally, the saliva found on both her left and right breasts led the police to collect the samples and request DNA testing. It turned out that the DNA came from 2 people, both of whom were women. So, whose DNA was it? After ruling out all other possible connections, the police realized that the DNA belonged to the 2 young daughters. The poor children, seemingly hungry, had tried to nurse from their mother, lying motionless in the middle of the house, unaware that their mother had already passed away. Finally, another reason for suspecting a sexual assault was dismissed. When a woman is targeted for sexual assault, the perpetrator typically exhibits behaviors such as attacking the victim's face or completely restraining the victim's wrists. However, there were no signs of such actions on the victim's body. The most important discovery was that the semen test came back negative. So, was the perpetrator there to rob her? In fact, the crime scene did not resemble an intentional theft. Although the house appeared to have been ransacked, there was something unnatural about it. Firstly, the wardrobe and drawers were wide open, but if you look closely, only the top drawer of the chest was open. It is clear that burglars usually open drawers from the bottom, or at least open all of them, not just one and then leave. Secondly, the computer in the room was knocked over. This was an entirely unnecessary action. Thirdly, the blanket in the closet fell onto the floor, but it was folded neatly. Fourthly, in the kitchen, the wife's belongings were scattered everywhere in her bag. Normally, when someone commits a crime, the purpose of searching is to find the victim's wallet, but the criminal didn't seem to even touch the wallet. The cash was still there. Fifthly, thieves rarely choose to act at the end of a holiday period because most families are gathered together at that time. Sixthly, the front door being left open was also a truly strange and unnatural point. According to experts, criminals rarely leave doors open like that because they need to reduce the chance of anyone discovering the crime. For them, it would make sense to delay the timing as much as possible. So why would the door be left open, even going so far as to wedge a doorstop in place? It was truly odd. Who was the perpetrator? Without an answer to this question, the police faced another difficult problem. During the investigation, they shouldn't rule out the possibility that the perpetrator was not just one person, as there was evidence of 2 different types of cigarette butts found in the sink and near the victim's body. DNA from 2 unidentified men was discovered in these cigarette butts. However, when the police compared the DNA, it didn't match anyone in their list of individuals with criminal records. But do you feel something strange? What kind of foolish criminal smokes a cigarette there and leaves it behind after committing the crime, as if trying to leave a mark? There was even a cigarette burn on the sofa, almost as if deliberately emphasizing this detail. In the midst of confusion over the countless clues with no clear answers, the police took note of a statement from a neighbor near the victim's house. One neighbor mentioned that on the morning the incident was discovered, the husband was crying and pressing the doorbell, knocking on the door and calling for help, looking very pitiful. Detectives and medical staff also recalled that the husband was indeed very shocked and cried a lot. Although this was a fairly normal reaction, the somewhat unnatural behavior of the husband caught the attention of the investigators. Once again, they decided to review all the CCTV footage from the elevator on that day, and something suspicious immediately appeared. Specifically, at the time the incident was first discovered, the investigation wasn't progressing well because the husband was so distraught and couldn't keep his composure. So the police had no choice but to ask him to return home. Therefore, the husband entered the elevator and left the scene. However, inside the elevator, his behavior was peculiar. There was an advertisement board in the corner of the elevator, and the husband stared at it intently. A man who had just cried over his wife's death was now focusing on the advertisement. It was unclear how he managed to gather the composure to do this. Furthermore, look at this CCTV footage. When someone from another floor entered the elevator, he walked to the mirror, looked at himself, and then styled his hair like this. Surprisingly, just a few minutes earlier, the image of the husband at the scene appeared to be much more composed, but now in the elevator, his demeanor had changed rapidly. Although the husband's alibi was clearly confirmed, and he was excluded from the list of suspects even in the elevator CCTV footage, it was evident that the baby waved goodbye to her mother before leaving with her father. So why did the extremely suspicious shift in his attitude arise, which the police had just uncovered? Once again, the police met with the young girl and asked, "How did your mother wave? What did her face look like when she waved?" The girl replied, "Mom waved with a grimace." The police seemed to grasp the issue and immediately reviewed all the information related to the case, especially regarding the wife's body, hoping to find something that might reveal a clue linking the husband to the crime. A crime. In the autopsy report, the police discovered that the wife had died with her hands clenched. When they opened her hands, the forensic team found something that looked like purple dust. This was definitely an important detail. The police collected the sample and sent it for analysis. It turned out to be purple fabric fibers. Do you remember the person wearing purple clothes in the images we've seen so far? That's right, it was the husband's shirt. The police then ordered his arrest and confiscated the shirt, sending it to the National Forensic Agency for analysis. The results showed that the fabric's composition was identical to the fibers found on the wife's hands. Upon learning this, the husband immediately objected, arguing that since they were married, it could have been a natural and coincidental contact. But of course, this didn't fool the police. They understood that the issue depended on the amount of fabric dust found on the wife's hands. If it had been a natural occurrence, her hands wouldn't be so covered in purple dust unless the victim had tightly gripped it and pulled it with considerable force. The police proceeded to examine the number of fabric fibers to determine whether the action was forced. The police didn't expect it, but from this additional important evidence was gathered. The autopsy showed that the food the victim had eaten the previous day was still in her stomach. This meant that the victim died before the food was digested, indicating the time of death was right after finishing the meal. If the victim had just finished eating with her husband and then collapsed dead, why could she still wave goodbye to her 5-year-old daughter at 12:26 a.m. that night? Because of this, there were conflicting opinions within the investigation team. One side believed that the 5-year-old would never lie, while the other suggested that the child could have done this under her father's guidance. This meant that the child, seeing her father raise his hand and telling her to wave goodbye to her mother, acted out of habit in a groggy state. And this hypothesis turned out to be correct. When the CCTV was carefully reviewed, many people got chills, as it was clear that the 5-year-old girl only did this because her father had raised his hand first and told her to do so. The description of her mother grimacing while waving likely came from the girl's memory of her mother's final painful expression. In a way, that man used his children to cover up his crime. As things began to come to light, the police started to reconsider the husband's behavior on the day of the incident. Here, many strange points started to attract attention. Firstly, if the mother-in-law had called him from the hair salon and told him that she couldn't contact his wife, he should have gone straight home to check. However, he insisted that his mother-in-law wait outside the salon while he went to pick her up. Secondly, even though he arrived and saw that the lights in the salon were off and the door was locked, he still tried to look inside. Thirdly, he later went with his mother-in-law to the kindergarten, even though he had already spoken to the teacher on the phone and knew his daughter hadn't gone to school. He then went home, even though their house was closer to his parents' house than to the salon or the kindergarten. All of these detours in his movements seemed as if this man wanted his mother-in-law to act as an alibi for him. Finally, as the investigation continued, under the pressure of several key pieces of evidence, the husband confessed to the crime during police interrogation. He stated that it was a spontaneous murder. However, considering that he had picked up cigarette butts earlier and prepared everything to create an alibi, it was clear that the act had been planned in advance. Not to mention the fact that not only did he harm his wife, but he also abandoned his small children in the horrifying scene, forcing them to stay with their mother's body for 14 hours. This led to additional charges of child abuse. In the end, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. During the appeal process, the despicable man continuously claimed that he lacked financial resources, didn't have a proper job, and had to endure constant verbal and physical abuse from his wife for a long time. They had been separated. He later stated that he had been diligently preparing to get his real estate agent license, but on the day of the incident he intentionally returned home because it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. However, his wife threw harsh words at him, calling him a useless good-for-nothing, and kicked him out. In his anger, he killed his wife on the spot. In the end, he was still looking for ways to blame others. Even though, while he was preparing for his certification exam, his wife had actually been struggling to make a living. Previously, his wife had run a hair salon and saved up some money to open a karaoke bar with that money. But after running the business for a while, the husband said the business was difficult and gave up on it to open a pizza shop. However, that didn't make much money either, so the wife had to pinch pennies to save. Even before having children, she had taken on many side jobs at home to earn extra income. Later, she reopened a hair salon and managed it diligently. Initially, they decided to divorce by mutual agreement. However, during this period, it was said that the wife had agreed to give her husband 30 million won in alimony so that he could buy a house and live separately, as he didn't have money. The wife was very patient and kind, treating her husband with great affection. But why did the husband do such a terrible thing? He even left his 2 children at the crime scene and used the remaining child to wave goodbye to their mother, even though their mother was already dead. In the final trial, the mother-in-law cried non-stop because she couldn't accept that the 20-year sentence was far too little compared to her daughter's life. She wiped away her tears. A moment later, she sighed and said, "Although we faced many difficulties, my daughter was finally able to buy that apartment. She was so happy and content. But who would have thought that just a short time after moving in, my daughter would suffer such a tragic fate? Could it be that my daughter's destiny was always meant to be filled with suffering like this?"